And the main philosophy, the main goal of this entire project was somehow to be bridging this gap between the world of semantic recognition networks and the world of generative models, because both worlds really got to really impressive places. So we can generate really nice things. The GANs since 2014 have done a long way and can do amazing things. And the world of semantic recognition, so this entire decade is all about this classification or object recognition networks. And we began to be interested in combining those, in trying to bridge this gap. And what we were really interested about is if we can somehow use generative models to explore what's happening inside these very popular semantic models. And just to clarify what I mean by saying is semantic or generative. So semantic models are semantic because eventually they have some kind of a label that is used by some common and agreed language, and this is what makes it semantic. So it somehow lets us believe that features that are learned inside this process, inside this network, they have some meanings that maybe we can name, maybe we can describe as human beings what we're seeing. And this is technically possible only in models that contain some sort of a source that has some kind of an agreed name. And generative models are models that try to learn distribution of data. So it can be done in several ways, but usually the main idea is that you're giving data. There's no labeling or stuff like this usually, and generative models, they try to find the distribution, and sometimes they can impressively generate by sampling new instances. And GANs are just one type of generative models, but by far the most popular one and probably the most successful one in terms of quality. So I see many activities in the chat, so I'm just going to mention that it's going to be hard for me. To look at the chat. So if anyone wants to ask a question, so do it orally.
Assaf, I will also mention if there's something in the chat that is relevant and somebody's not saying orally, I will say it. No worries.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's great. Okay, so this work with all these wonderful people was about bridging this gap. And the idea is as follows. So everyone knows classification networks, and we thought, okay, you know that when you have a classification network, then you can input some image inside. Say it was trained on ImageNet, or maybe we really like the data set called MIT Places 365, and you can then feed it with some input image, and if your model is well trained, then you're probably going to get the correct class for it. But we were after inverting this process, so we're sort of looking for a way to invert a neural network. And the way we wanted to do this, what we wanted to achieve is to explore through the different layers, so that, for example, we want to generate a new image that has the same semantic representation, it corresponds to the same intermediate feature map for this specific second layer that you see in this illustration. So we want another different image, but that is semantically described the same way. And we're not just interested in this one image. So we want many images. So we're after exploring this subspace of realistic images that match the same feature map in this specific layer for the reference image that we have. And we want to be able to do this not just for the one specific layer. So we want to do this for deeper layers too, and then go deeper and deeper. And we do have some hunch even before doing it about what kind of behavior we're going to witness. So what I mean is, if you think about a typical recognition model, so usually the deeper you go through the network, you get this downscaling. You have usually max pooling layers or other types of layers that that resize spatially the image and make it smaller. And moreover, the more you are close to the to your output, to the output class, to the softmax layer, say, so the closer you get to it, you need less and less information regarding how to exactly reconstruct the original image. So, for example, if my goal for this image is to eventually label it as a road, it really doesn't matter what kind of road it is. So it makes sense that at some layer of the network, I'm going to lose information regarding characteristics that I don't care about in order to classify it. So even by a hunch, we know that there is this degree of freedom that keeps rising the deeper you go in the network. And in this tiny example here, we're going to see more examples soon. You can see how when we look at this only the second layer, so changes are really small, only like textures are changing, but the deeper you go to the right hand side of your screen, you get changes that are more drastic. So we wanted to have some kind of system that does this, that given a model, given a reference image, it's now going to let us explore through these intermediate representations. And we don't want it to be, in the past there were some, I'll mention it in a while, some ways of trying to invert networks, but it always involved some kind of an optimization process. So we want to do this just in a single feed-forward pass, so that we can do it to many images on the fly, how many that we want to do. Okay, so for different classes, many different images, and all the layers, and just by a single feed-forward pass, we want to get all these subspaces of images and explore through them. Now, this is one side of what we can do with this framework. So this is very nice for research goals. But this isn't just about visualizing and understanding, because this sort of thing gives you an ability, an applicative ability that can do many other stuff. So let me give some quick examples. Now, the key idea is that if you're able to reconstruct realistic images conditioned by semantic representations, it means that you can do many types of manipulations. You can manipulate the semantic representations, and now we get this really nice ability to project this manipulation, project these modifications back to image pixels, so we can edit images realistically, but conditioned by some semantic representations. So one simple ability you can do is do things kind of like image-to-image translation. So in this case, you can see sketch to photo, but we'll explore through this later. But you can see that it's not like pix to pix. It's not just matching the pixels. So it sort of gives this semantic conditioning, but there is a lot more freedom in the generated image. Another thing we can do is what we call semantic composition. So maybe some of you are familiar with these works that doing these compositions, but it's usually very geometric thing. So you usually have this small statue of a rabbit. I don't know why they always use it, but it's like the most used thing. And you do stuff with lightning and calculate things regarding spherical harmonics. So this isn't this. So you can see that we have this. I think it's a church. So we have this church prop, and we want to sort of implant it in this field, and the only thing that is preserved is the semantic representation. So you can see that this castle or old church there that was generated in the field there has some characteristics that tend to match the environment, and maybe it is more likely to see this sort of building rather than what we used as a reference. So the implanting happens by modifying the pixels completely, but to a degree of a controllable change. So by choosing which semantic layer we use, we define the degree of freedom that we allow. And another nice example is a thing we call image relabeling. So we take an image that is labeled, that has one label that belongs to a certain class, and then we are able to see what it would look like if it had the same, roughly the same feature maps, but with a different label. So in this example, take a volcano, and and now we're trying to make it to be a snowy mountain instead. And we'll talk more about these applications. These are all consequence of the fact that we're able to project to pixels changes we do to semantics. So there were some previous works that tried to explore what happens in the intermediate representations and tried to regenerate images. And one of the popular ones, already from 5 years ago, was done by Manhadran and Vedaldi, and they did this optimization process. Really, I think the most logical thing to do. Let's say you start from this noisy, noisy input, and you have your reference image, and it's kind of you trying to solve the riddle of giving a feature map what was the original input image. And the way they were doing this is by gradient descent optimization. So all the weights of the network, all the parameters stay frozen, but they do this optimization with respect to the input image pixels. So they iteratively change the pixels so that the semantic representation in some layer will be as close as possible to the given semantic representation. And you can see that it was really interesting to see that at the time. It's a very nice and elegant tool. But eventually, if you go to some deeper layer, so naturally, you won't be able to reconstruct the original image because you have already lost too much information. And what you're going to get, because this is an ill-posed problem, there are many possible solutions. There are many possible images that you would fit in this network and will give you the same feature map. And since this is not a generative model, this is a discriminative model. So it usually, what it does, it converges to some sort of a mean or an average of all the possible results. So this is why we get all these weird colors over there, and this is not a realistic image. So so this was great at the time, but this was not what we were after. On the other hand, so everyone knows GANs, generative adversarial networks. It was first done by Ian Goodfellow 2014, and it became super popular, popular to the extent that you cannot publish any paper today that is something GAN. Whatever you try, it's already taken. It happened to me several times that we had this name that we want to give to a work, and apparently it was already taken for whole other projects that have nothing to do with it. I mean, with what we intend to call it. And GANs are generative. I'm sure most of you are familiar enough with GANs, and I just want to like say the thing about GANs that will pitch to where I'm getting at. So GANs is a generative model, and being as such, it assumes even conditional GANs or regular GANs, it doesn't matter. It assumes that there are numerous possible solutions to whatever you're trying to solve. So there is a distribution of possible results, not just a single one. And being aware to the existence of other results and to the fact that you're not looking just for one result, this is the first step towards not always returning average of possible results. So, so our goal is to combine these two disciplines and bridge this gap. So we want to use again in order to obtain these intermediate representations. So let's finally see how this thing works. So here's how the algorithm works. So we have this classification network. We were using VGG, and now we're going to create a generator with an architecture that is mirror-like with respect to the classification model that we have. So for every layer in the classification network, we have this matching block in the generator, and the input to the generator is just a random noise, and as usually with the GANs. But there is this conditioning link. So we have this link connecting each layer to each layer of the classification network to a generator block. And in the next slide, I'm going to show how this link, I mean, how technically and architecturally this link is composed. But the main idea is that during training time, we can just randomly choose which of these conditions is suppressed and which is activated. So we can do this randomly. And then at inference time, the user is able to choose which layer you wants to condition the result on. So for example, as you see now, if we choose conditioning on this first layer, on the layer that is the close most to the pixels, so we're getting this image which is almost identical to the reference image that we have. But we can, oh, sorry. And the thing is that if we want to explore through this subspace of possible results, now we have to jiggle with the input noise. So the generator works such that the input noise is propagated through the generator, and the final result we get is depends on two factors. One of them would be this random noise, and the second one is the conditioning that we chose. Okay, so now if we go to a deeper layer and we jiggle with the noise, we can explore through the subspace of realistic images that match the feature map that was given by this input image. And of course, we can go deeper and deeper. And the deeper we go, we're going to get more drastic changes to the image that we have. So the way we train it is with 3 losses. So the first loss is an adversarial loss, and so we're using a discriminator, and I think this is the most obvious part. And the goal of the adversarial loss is to make sure that we are getting realistic images. We want only images that look real. So these subspaces I've been talking about are actually they're not the subspace of possible solution. They're not just the subspaces of possible solutions of images that give the same feature map. They are the intersection of these subspaces with the subspace of realistic images. Okay, we only want images that make sense. And the second loss is called diversity loss, and this is how we make sure that we're getting different images to different noises. So it's not just mode collapse of the same image. And I'll explain in a few slides, I'll explain exactly what the diversity loss is. But now there is the most important loss, and this is the maybe what actually makes this objective work. And this is called the semantic reconstruction loss. And the way it works is that we take the output image now that we get from the generator, and we feed it again to the classification network. And it goes through the classification network layers just until the relevant layer that we conditioned on. And now we're going to have this perceptual loss, this L1 distance between the feature map from the original reference image and the new generated image, because we have to make sure that they have the same feature map. So it's not enough just to condition on it, because you can condition and then the generator can do whatever it wants to do. But now we have this explicit loss that's saying that whatever you generate has to be very close to, in this particular layer, in this particular feature map, it has to be very close to the representation of the original reference image. So,
hi, can I ask a question? So
yeah,
this
sure.
is actually the road that you are kind of like being constant, am I right?
So, I'm sorry, could you come again?
It's actually the road that you're holding constant, am I correct? The feature, your feature is the road that you're holding constant in this example?
What do you mean the raw data?
Because the only thing that doesn't really change is that there's a road, right?
The road.
Oh, the road.
The path, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, so it's, this output is still can be classified as a road, but we require more than this, because we're not just requiring, we're not going all the way to the end of the, to the classification result of the classifier. We go just until the relevant layer. So this is a stronger requirement than just keep the same class. We want to have the same semantic representation for this layer.
Okay, so you're actually having like the feature map itself is like each of them are layers inside your algorithm that you can kind of like pull out and say, maybe this time round the feature is the road, but maybe next time round I want my feature to be the tree in the middle, and then everything else around it kind of like morphs around it. Am I right to say that?
Oh, you're asking if I can spatially condition in the image, so just choose parts of the image?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
So the answer is yes. So this is kind of a spoiler, because this is going to happen just in a few slides.
Okay.
But the answer is yes. Yeah. Okay.
Assaf, I have also 2 questions about the previous losses, the adversarial diversity. The adversarial loss, what is the ground truth? How is it Is it just road images, or is it something more that is coming from the features on the top part of this slide?
Yeah, so the adversarial loss is by a discriminator. This is just like, you know, a standard GAN.
Yeah.
And there, I wouldn't say there is ground truth, but there is the real data. So
yeah, that's what I meant. Like, is it just images of roads, for example, and each doesn't matter which generative layer you're taking, you're comparing it to images of roads on the discriminator part?
So it's not just images of road, because this would be all the images in your data set, because this is a GAN that is training to generate images according to a data set that contains many classes. In this case, it's the MIT Places 365. So there are 365 classes, and I didn't mention it before, but sort of the basic model, the basic GAN model that we built upon is the self-attention GAN. And I would say, I mean, we took also some tricks from big GAN. So I would say this is somewhere in the middle between being self-attention GAN from 2017 or 18 to the popular big GAN. And what's common for both of them, and in this there is this like branch of GANs that, as opposed to, I'm sure all of you have seen and have been really impressed from these GANs generating faces, the style GAN, progressive GAN, and they are domain specific. They're trained to be domain specific, and they have these incredible results. But there is like a different branch of GAN challenges, and these are for generating diverse data. So generating ImageNet or generating MIT Places, and there are several tricks in order to do that. But eventually the thing is that the same GAN generates all the classes. So it can be road, churches, houses, trees, I don't know, hills and mountains, and all of them are in the same GAN. So so the real data here is the
entire training data set.
Is the entire training data set. And
so you basically,
it's adversarial, classic adversarial training. You know, see sometimes the fake output and sometimes the real example from the data set. And according to this, both the discriminator and the generator are training.
So, but you have here one discriminator, one general discriminator, and for each generation block, you have the generator. You have multiple generators, one discriminator, actually. Right?
I wouldn't say I have many generators. I would say I have just a single generator that can be conditioned differently at any case. Okay, so there is just this one generator, nothing more.
I understand. And another question about the diversity. How is that calculated? Every time you condition on the different blocks, the different diversity calculation, or?
So I'm going to explicitly show how the diversity loss works. I have a slide on that. This is actually based on prior work, and I'm going to mention it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks for the questions. So I want to dig in to show you how this link, this connection, each and every one of these red arrows that you've seen between the classifier and the generator. So I'm going to show you how it works. So you can see at the top we have this. So at the top you can see we have our feature map. This is feature map from some layer, and then this feature map is multiplied by what by now we only know that can be 0 or 1. So we either kill it or we let it flow. And you can see as another spoiler here, we'll talk about it in a few slides, that it doesn't have to be entirely, we don't have to kill the entire feature map or let the entire feature map in. Okay, but for now, let's just think about this as a switch. This can be either 0 or 1. So this feature map can be either turned on or off. And then it goes through one convolutional layer. And then we have this simple arithmetic addition, summation of this feature map that underwent this convolution, and the previous and the output of the previous block of the generator. So if you think about it, so from the top we get the conditioning, we get information regarding the feature map, but from the right in this figure, we're getting some kind of representation that is a function of the input noise. It just the noise propagates from right to left, while the conditioning propagates from the classifier from the top down. So this G out that we see here is a function both of the noise and the conditioning, and all the blocks look about the same way. So if you have conditioning in different for different blocks, then this G out is a function of all the previous conditionings and of this input noise that we have. And one thing that I want to point out is this convolutional layer that we put here in between. And philosophically, I would say that this convolutional layer, the role of this convolutional layer is sort of translating the language of semantics of classification, translated to the language of GANs. So it's not trivial, and there is no actual reason to believe that the representations that we have in intermediate layers of GANs have anything to do with representations that we have in the intermediate layers of classifiers. So philosophically, we were thinking that this layer is supposed to do this translation, to learn this. This is a learned convolution that learns how to transform it to match. And we also have normalization there. And so this is the main block. This is how one block of this system looks like.
I have a question. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
About the convolution you just described that supposedly translates from one latent vector to the other kind of latent vectors. Did you try? I mean, why do you use convolution and not a fully connected layer, for example? Because the convolution has a limited footprint, essentially, that's whereas fully connected would have more freedom. I mean, I understand it has more memory. Is that the reason, or?
So the reason to use a convolution here is probably the same reason for using convolutions in any other place. So you want, when you're dealing with the visual data, so you want this property of shift invariance, and you want this property of matching spatial locations. So if once you use a fully connected layer rather than a convolutional layer, then you lose all the spatial restrictions. So this feature map is not going. I mean, there's not going to be any matching pixels by locations. You're just going to learn something much heavier and that is not holding spatial and any spatial logic.
Okay, so you want to preserve the spatial distribution of the scene.
Yeah, sure, you do. I mean, these are, in the classifier, these are convolutional layers, and in the generator, these are convolutional layers, and they are like this for a reason, and the connection between them, you still wanted to match spatially. Okay.
Can I also ask a question? So plus is concatenation, or it's really some operation?
So class is an arithmetic summation. It's not a concatenation, and the reason that it's not a concatenation is that this block, we were thinking about this a lot. We were trying to decide, but eventually this block has to have, this G out that we have here must have the same number of channels, whether the condition was activated or not.
I see. And I got it. And regarding the masking, isn't it worth to make after convolution? Because if you multiply by and want to cut some region, so you get some artifacts. So isn't it better to first to convolve and then making masking?
So we're going to mention the masking just in a second. But regarding what you're pointing out, so you're saying at the edges of the mask, you're going to have this, you're going to smudge these edges. But the thing is that this is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay? I'm going to say a few words about it later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now, as promised, I'll briefly explain what was this diversity loss that I mentioned. So this is actually based on prior work from 2018, it was in CVPR. This is called MS-GAN or mode-seeking GAN. And this is a really, really surprisingly simple solution to diversity. And this is how it works. Instead of training to map input noises to generated images, we're going to do this in pairs. We're going to look at pairs of noises. Now, of course, everything works in batches. So we're going to divide our batch into pairs of noises. And so this means that every pair of latent vectors now is now mapped to 2 images. And what we're going to do is very simple. We're going to want that the farther away these noises are from each other, so will the generated images also be far away from each other. So we're just going to simply require that we're going to say, okay, we're always going to divide by the distance between these 2 latent, by these 2 output images. We want them to be far from each other. So we're dividing by their distance. This is the loss. But we're multiplying in the numerator, we're multiplying by the distance between the input noises, the latent vectors. Because this means if we happen to have 2 latent vectors that are very close to each other, then it does make sense that we're going to generate 2 images that are very close to each other. But if the noises are far away from each other, now we want to have images that are different. And this makes it principled. And this works amazingly well. This is very simple, and the distance between these images is taking actually just L1 distance between the pixels. And in their original work, the MS-GAN work, they tried to do like more fancy things using perceptual features or using layers of the discriminator instead. But the simplest thing is what worked best, and this is also what we used. And this was actually very helpful because we had severe problems of mode collapse, and we tried many ways in decoding back to the latent and many other classical solutions, and all failed miserably for us. And this very simple thing eventually worked like charm. Okay, so now let's go back to this thing that we've had too many spoilers about. So we don't have to just either let the entire feature map in or out. So we can use these spatial masks. So in this particular example, let's say I want to change the entire image except this bush over there. So the user can input this mask at inference time. The user can also feed the network with this mask, and now we're going to use this mask in this block that we have just seen to spatially determine which, for each pixel in the image, which a layer is going to be the condition for, or maybe more than one layer. I can do whatever I want at every layer of this network. So I can use this mask in this third layer over there, and then this, for example, this anti-mask at a deeper layer. And now I'm going to jiggle with the noise, and I'm going to generate an image in which the bush remains almost the same because it's conditioned in a layer that is close to the pixels, but the background is changing drastically. And let's see how this thing works. So in training time, we just use these random props for the masking, so that now the generator learns how to deal with different types of masks randomly, and at test time and inference time, the user can choose the mask to input in. And now the way it works during training, and this is the preferable set of masks to use also at inference time, is a bit different from what we saw in the last slide. So it works so that, let's say I want to do like the thing we did with the bush in the previous slide. So the way it's going to work is that I'm going to select the layer for which I want to generate the background, as we had before. So and in this particular layer, I'm going to let the whole layer in, so there is no masking at all. Just go all the way in. And for the following layers, everything you see here to the left. Okay, I accidentally clicked to unmute in my laptop. And the following layers, what you see from there and to the left. So we're going to use this mask resized to the matching relevant size for each layer. Okay, so we're not just going to use this in one layer. We're seeing this sort of composition from many layers. And the reason we do it this way is that if we want our generator to be able to know, or to have some kind of idea how to replace these missing areas that we use. So, or more specifically, if we wanted to be able to handle the boundaries around this, this black region mask that you're seeing here. So for example, think about the areas that are these regions that are very tight around the bush that we've seen before. So it has to have some clue at every layer from the previous layer along the edges, so that if I want these edges to be correct, you have to keep in mind that whatever it generates in this layer, in what you see in red, is going to grow to be thicker and thicker as we go closer to the pixels, and this is going to be a significant region in the image, and actually the most important one, because whenever we look at replacing parts of images, the boundaries are the most sensitive challenges that we want to be able to do correctly. So for completing the red zone over here, we must have enough clues in the previous layer over here. But if we don't if we don't let the conditioning from all the layers go in for this part that we want to regenerate, then we won't be able to do this. So this is one thing that took us some time to figure out. And another trick over here is that at every such layer, we actually input the mask to this layer, and we concatenate it as one more channel that includes also the mask. So we sort of let this layer know what the mask looks like and what is the region. So the idea is that this layer takes into account, the next layer takes into account which parts are generated and which are conditioned, so that it sort of identify the fact that it has to act in a different way for the generated parts and for the more strict areas, the conditioned ones from the feature map.
Assaf, this is very interesting. I might have missed something you explained, so I would love to ask again. I'm sorry if it's repetitive. So what, if I understood, but please correct me. When you're looking at inference time, you want to generate new image, you first go, of course, on the first pass, on the top one on that slide you showed. And then you'd use the masks. After that selected layer, and with this selected layer, this is where the GAN is going to be. That's the block, the GAN block that's going to be activated, right? After that, you take
entirely.
Yeah. After that, you take all the features. You don't do any masking. So when the GAN is running, after that, when you do the generation part, so basically the generation, it doesn't matter, it doesn't look at the masks, but then when you do the comparison between the output features for the loss of the inference network and the generative network, then you're taking into consideration this mask. Am I in the right direction, or am I completely
No, not exactly. Not exactly. What I'm showing in this slide is just basically the scheme of what is the typical use. And when I say typical use, is what we do during training and what we tested in our inference and experiments. So, because you can do whatever you want with the masks, but this is how we do it and what works. So the basic scheme is that as opposed to what I showed you here is sort of oversimplifying. So what you understand here is that all the masks are turned totally off, except two masks. One that only activates the bush and one that only activates the background. But the truth is that we do it a bit differently. So think about this. This black region here is what caps. This is like the other way around. The black region here is what you have. Is what you have only conditioned in a deep layer, okay? Because you think about it, because these black regions, they are not conditioned on anything, okay? So whatever you get inside the black region is coming from this relatively deep layer. So it has this freedom to change a lot.
On the generation part, when you're starting to generate using the generation layers.
Yeah, so what you have here in the black part, this is generated, and what you have in the white regions, okay, this means that it's conditioned. And you can say, why do I need all these white areas in the intermediate layers? It was enough if I would just take the last one, because if you condition on a layer that is very close to the pixels, then sure, you're going to get something that is almost identical. But we insist on also conditioning in this intermediate layers, even though you've already seen something that is almost the answer, like almost the reference image, and you can reconstruct it. We're conditioning in these intermediate layers too. And the reasons we do it is not for the conditioning itself, because this, what we said before, this hypothesis is correct. If you give someone a better solution, you don't need to give clues on the already known solution. Like every layer is a clue for the next layer. Okay, but this gives, but this actually affects the black region.
Yeah, and
it affects the black region because of receptive.
The boundary.
Okay, because now if you see this red boundary over here, it gets bigger and bigger, and the pixels in this red area are affected not only from the black region, but also from the white region at these areas that are close to the boundary. And if we have these features conditioned, now it has some clue what it needs, like how it should handle this boundary, because it knows what semantically is supposed to be on the other side of this boundary.
And when you're saying conditioning, just so like, you know, me and maybe others will make sure we understand, you mean we're taking the features from the inference pass, from the top pass, and this is the conditioning for this area.
When I say conditioning, I'm referring to this block, and this means
it's
white
turned
area
on.
here is conditioning, and this black area here is not conditioning.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, great. So let's see what kind of applications we're able to do using this framework. So the first one is the most basic one, I guess, and this is generating by reference. So this is like, you know, the main application is what we've already seen. It's about having a reference image and then generating new images. You can sort of say, okay, I like this image, but can you give me a similar image with the same meaning, but a little bit different? And then I would ask you, okay, but how different? So you have this controllable amount of diversity that is controlled by how deep you go in the network. So you can use conv4, conv5, or go to the fully connected layers. You can see at the last fully connected layer, you can see that at some point even adds this motorcycle there on the road. So you're able to do this, and you can see this as a generative tool, or maybe some kind of a research tool, like to investigate what happens inside your neural network and see what these subspaces of possible inputs that match these feature maps. And the second application, we call it repainting. This is opposed to image inpainting, a very popular challenge. And you've actually already seen how we're doing this one, right? So this means that I want to take some region in the image and say, okay, it's good, but I don't totally like it. I want to change it. Okay, and again, I have this controllable amount of diversity. I can decide how different I want the background in this example to be. Okay, and differently from image inpainting, it's not like I have to make up what I have there. I do have a clue, and the clue is the semantic connection. For example, you can see that I constantly change the background, but the place where there was a building, there is still a building. It can be a different building. It can have like a different appearance and other features, but it's still a building because semantically the representation of the building still exists in this layer. And same goes for the tree over there and for the sky. So sky can be different, cloudy or not cloudy, and all other characteristics. But you can see that the main structure, I mean, if you would describe this image to a blind person, you would probably describe it the same, unless you're like very deep into details and describe what kind of texture there is on the windows of the building. But the main idea is that if you describe it to a blind person, they'll say, okay, so on the right there is a building, on the top you can see the sky, and on the left there is a tree, and this is still kept. Here is another example. So you can take your photos taken from hiking journeys that you've made and change the background, and then you can tell people that you've been to many other places as well. And
is maybe later on you'll show us what happens when you pick a deeper layer to take that as the selected layer to start conditioning from.
Yeah, so I think in this particular example, I'm not sure which exact layer we used, but I think it was that it was the fifth convolution block in VGG. Okay, so I think it was like the last convolutional block. So not the fully connected ones, but the last convolution. And I'm not sure if I have more examples. I mean, for this specific repainting from other layers.
So for debugging, for network debugging purposes, this means that the last convolution actually holds a lot of the semantic information of the background, not just what we see, but how the backend is.
I mean, it's very surprising. There are some very surprising things that we've seen. Since you mentioned it, I'll tell you some things we're seeing that are very surprising. So you also have the completely last layer, which is the logics that you have before the softmax, or maybe the softmax itself. And surprisingly, this is just a confusion matrix, right? The softmax is just, you know, it's a vector, the length of the number of classes that you have, and you have the probability for each class. Surprisingly, you can recover some details just from this vector. Like some colors can be retrieved, and some spatial spatial structures can actually be reconstructed just from this confusion matrix. So somehow it's embedded, so that if I have this one class and I know, I know this class is a bird, but I tend to confuse it maybe with a chair. So specifically for this, I can retrieve some information regarding what kind of bird it is, what colors it has. So it's, a lot of this information actually goes deeper in the network, even though we know it's not needed. You don't need to know what color the bird is in order to just say that this is a bird. But for some reason it exists there.
You know, it gives, like, I'm just thinking out loud, this gives a clue that there's some sort of inefficiency in compressing the information from the image on the last layers. Maybe you can make them much, much smaller and have much less info. You don't need all the colors to recognize a bird, right? So for anybody who's doing research, if you're looking into that measuring of inefficiency of how much information is encoded on the last layers, I don't know if there is research done about it and how sophisticated it is, but it'd be interesting to find out.
So, I mean, you're right. But the bad news is that, of course, there is inefficiency and there is huge inefficiency. But the problem is that the trade of it is that your network has to be super over-parameterized, or you wouldn't be successful in optimizing it. So it's a known fact that all these networks are a few order of magnitudes bigger than what they should be. But this is what we are successful at optimizing. And then you can think about things that people do, like pruning and data and distillation and stuff like this.
Interesting.
Okay.
We have a question here.
I also have a question.
Yeah, sure.
It's a little bit back. So do I understand correctly that you have two stages? You have training stage and you have like a test stage or inference stage. In inference, you just propagate. You don't use adversarial losses or anything else. It's like, or you still can, because most of the losses are unsupervised, so you can still pay a specific image to make some optimization. And but if I understand correctly, there is no any optimization during test. And then it means that during training, all these masks and all this like masking and so on is like stochastic. You just randomly select masking and everything else.
Everything you said is correct. Yes.
Yes. But during training, you should say, let's say this is class is defined, so it's like class is predefined, classifier is predefined, and class is predefined. These are two conditions.
Yeah, and yeah. I mean, the classes, we use the class that we produce from the classifier. The classifier, I'm not sure I mentioned it, but it's super important. If I didn't, I'm sorry. The classifier is pre-trained, and we're not retraining it, and it's totally frozen.
It was
so
clear.
We also get the class, and the class actually influences the entire generator. I'll mention it in a few seconds when I'll talk about relabeling. So I'll briefly explain how it works. But yeah, sure. We take the image, we feed it to the classifier, we take the relevant feature maps or whatever, and one thing that is always relevant is the top of this classification network, which is the selected class.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And another, it's a minor question really. So if you think about test time, so it involves user. User actually, like his mask or her mask are not random. They are just semantic, like bush, birds, building, and so on. But during training, all masks are random without taking into account like any semantics. From this point of view, like objects and so on.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're mentioning just it gave us motivation to one thing that we tried, one experiment we did. We said maybe it's wrong to just use stochastic, you know, these square masks by random. Maybe it's not capturing what we want to achieve. So we said, okay, we can use some kind of semantic segmentation network out of the box,
Mm-hmm.
and then the masks will always match to some semantic class. And it didn't work too well, and I don't know why. I mean, I don't think it can't work well, just because it was maybe you know too much. We have the classification network, we have the generator, the discriminator. Now we have also this semantic segmentation throw in, and this was really, you know, too much. And for those, I don't know if anyone knows my other works, but usually my favorite thing is super small networks, training on single images and things that you get the results after a few seconds. And then I went to Google and I was saying, okay, how many TPUs do you want to use? And then you have all this thing, and you wait 2 weeks to get results and stuff like this. And I was starting to get confused, and they couldn't handle this anymore. So throwing in now a semantic segmentation model in there and try to optimize this as well was too much for me. So
you know what? It's a good time to mention on the chat here. While you were presenting before, people were talking about image generation for video gaming, and I think somebody mentioned that it's very high computationally wise to generate new images based on deep learning instead of using game and animation renderings.
Yeah, rendering, I mean, graphics is much less expensive than deep learning, this is for sure. And you should know that using big GANs, and specifically the big GAN that's named Big GAN, is not a trivial thing. I mean, I don't think that many people are able, I mean, physically, computationally, resources speaking, I don't think many people are able today to train something like a Big GAN. So if you're at Google or NVIDIA or Facebook, then you can do it. And I guess major universities, you can do this. I'm at the Weizmann Institute, and maybe I can do this. Maybe I have enough resources for it, but it's going to take a lot of time, because we got to the conclusion that doing this without a TPU is crazy. It takes like crazy amount of time. So dealing with these large GANs, this is a very exclusive thing. So I guess you can do inference using them and stuff like this, using some tricks, but training them, you must have really a lot of resources. This is a bit frustrating, actually.
I have actually 2 questions following this, but just before, Kona asked also here on the chat about using masks from generated semantic segmentation networks. I think we answered it just now. Just let us know if it's not enough. I had 2 questions just about this. On inference time and generating an image, let's say you get an input image, you need to calculate the class, and then with the class you go and you generate one output image. How long does it take, and on what hardware?
You mean at inference time? So inference is very, inference, I don't remember the numbers, but I don't want to say that it's real time. I don't think it's like real time can do in video, but it's single feed forward, probably milliseconds, you know.
On what type of GPU? Like
we use for the inference we use the V100 Tesla V100 GPU.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, but I think you can do it. You know, for just this single feed forward. I mean, you can do it with whatever GPU you have. I'm not sure it's going to be good for video. I mean, for real-time video, doing, you know, 30 frames per second, I'm not sure you can handle this, but it's not too far from that.
Mm-hmm. And training time in your case, how long did it take? How much resources?
So you can find everything in the paper. I'm going to say what I remember, and if I remember incorrectly, then I'm sorry. So I think we used this architecture of 16 by 16 TPUs. So there is something called like TPU topology, and some people know what it means. I'm not one of them. So there is this TPU topology of 16 by 16, and I think that the final model that we used, so it was about 1 week of training.
This is crazy.
Yeah, so you can only imagine what it would take you, like using just regular GPUs. Or if you have a single GPU, then I don't even want to think about it.
This is only something Google scale is possible to achieve, really. Not something we at home can do.
Yeah, this is what I said, a bit frustrating. Yeah. It's really large GANs. This is an exclusive club of people who can afford it.
And also another question regarding
But it depends on image resolution, so maybe someone who...
So we did, yeah, this is right. So for quick experiments at the beginning, we used smaller images. This is right. And what we're using now is the 256 by 256 images.
And also another question that was online before the lecture is there an open source of this code with the trained models?
So currently no, but we really want one. And I'm not at Google anymore, so it's very hard for me to influence on it. But I think that soon there's going to be this Colab notebook, so that people can use it. At least that. And maybe at some point, I mean, all my other projects, they are with the open source code, but since this is in Google, so sometimes things get tricky. I'm not sure of some bureaucracy, and I really hope that at some point that is going to be, the code is going to be open. And there's also this tricky thing because it's like a lot of the code is designed in a way that would match the Google frameworks and system. So I'm not sure. Someone needs to convert it somehow, and I'm not sure that anyone is going to do that. So,
if it happens, let me know. Assaf, I'll post it on our community. Everybody will get access.
Sure.
I have a question. You were mentioning that you tried to provide pre-existing semantic maps, and it didn't work. Yeah, there is a paper called Semantic Image Synthesis with Spatial Adaptive Normalization. It's usually abbreviated as SPADE.
I mean, SPADE, yeah.
Yes. So if people want to look into that, it explains partly why providing directly semantic maps is difficult. The short version is that the normalization we use in the networks will strip away most of the information that was contained in your semantic map. And so they propose a way to re-inject them regularly. And
yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm aware of this normalization problem.
Just about image generation, there is also all this recent work on neural reflection field, so NERFs, which are much more lightweight, but also don't generate stuff that doesn't exist, but preserve appearance that are difficult to render in practice. So for people who are interested about generating images that you cannot render, this is an interesting read.
Valentin, if you could post these two references on the subreddit. If not, send it over to me and I will post, but this, I would like people to have access to it.
Sure.
So if you can post the links.
So let me just comment about this. So this mentioned NERF. So it's really a fantastic work led by John Barron. And on a whole other topic, we had just about 2 weeks ago, in conjunction with the ECTV conference, we had a workshop regarding my other field, or my main field. This is actually what you're seeing now is the smaller side of what I do. And so we had this workshop called the Deep Internal Learning Workshop in conjunction with the ECCV conference. And we had really amazing speakers in our workshop there. And one of them was John Barron, who spoke exactly about this, about this NERF line of works. And he had this really great talk. So you're invited, and I can. So when we wrap this thing up, I'll quickly find it and send it over the chat. Link to this workshop. It was all recorded, and there were great speakers over there, including also Alyosha Efros and Andrea Vidaldi, and yours truly.
Mm.
And so just this is side mentioning of this, yeah.
Can I just comment something? So NERF is really brilliant paper, but training takes a lot of time, even for small images. It may be a day for like 266 by 266 images. It will take approximately a day. It is specific for a scene. There is also new work with NERF and Wild, but still it's training per specific scene. It's very slow, and it's like for augmentation, it's a good idea. For rendering, I'm not sure. This is what we don't understand. At least I don't understand exactly where is the application of the NERF itself. So if you can help from this point of view, it will help us advance.
I'm a bit reluctant of speaking now about NERF because this is not my work, and I really don't want to find myself saying things that are not correct. Okay, and this is in the research world. Not everything is about an application. Sometimes if you can show something, explain scientifically that you're able to exemplify something, this is a good enough point to have scientific papers, and so other people see it and do other scientific papers, and somewhere at the end of it, someone is going to do some kind of product that does something amazing, but the engineering is built on top of that, I guess. And since this NERF thing is from Google, so I do feel and believe that at some point we're going to bump into really cool applications and open to everyone and based on these things. It may take a while, but that's all I want to say about NERF. I don't know too much. I learned about it lately, just as everyone else. Okay, so before this long discussion that we just had, I was starting to show the applications of the semantic pyramid, and we were seeing this repainting. And the next application I want to mention is this image composition. We mentioned it before, so we can take this church over here, and we just want to implant it in different scenes. So we can take it either to this field or to this snowy area over there, and we're not just putting it there. We can let it change so that it matches the scene around it. And so now when we apply the semantic pyramid, you can see that in both cases it changed to whole other things that match the scene. This is still this still has a semantic representation that is the same. Okay, so I have the scene, and then in the middle I have this castle or church or whatever. And if I would, again, if I would have to describe it to some blind person, then probably I would describe it the same, even though it's really changed now. And another thing is out of distribution reference. So we're able to condition on images that are out of the distribution of what we trained on, and then sort of convert them to inside the distribution and generate with this reference. So for example, this is a grayscale image, and now we're able to just generate new images based on the semantics of this grayscale image. that are RGB images. And again, this is not pix-to-pix. This is not recolorization. And you can see, for example, that in this rightmost example over here, you can see that there are two towers instead of just one tower, because semantically this region in the image is mapped to towers. And think about this, if you go deep enough, these two towers are like combined into this one neuron, this one pixel. So this region in the image is mapped to towers. So in this case, in this particular case, it was chosen to split it into two towers. And also we can do this sketch to realistic images, and you can see we have different ones. And again, this isn't pix-to-pix. It has this degree of freedom. You just have to have roughly at the same regions, depending on how deep you went in the network. It has to have elements that are semantically similar.
This is so cool. I would have loved to have access to the open source.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you're friends with Yossi, right? So
yeah, you know.
He's the guy to press. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So okay, and the last application is this relabeling that I mentioned before, and the way it works, I'm just going to. I see that we're sort of out of time, so I'm just going to quickly describe the logic of this. So the class conditioned GANs are based on conditional batch norms. So this is a bit similar to this. Someone mentioned SPADE before, but class conditioned GANs work in this way that every batch norm layer in the generator and actually in the discriminator, the mean vector and the variance are actually functions of some sort of an embedding of the class. So the way you determine that your output is going to belong to one class rather than another is by normalizing it differently in all the normalization layers. So it means that the same feature map is normalized differently, and then it has another meaning. And it's really interesting to see how this thing affects the result. So, for example, we have this feature map of a highway, and we use the same conditioning. Everything is the same, but now we change the label to be a desert road. And you can see, for example, the different normalization takes feature maps that their interpretation can be mountains, but now it becomes to represent clouds, for example. And the same way we can map this mountain and relabel it to be a volcano. Okay, so these are all the applications that we're able to do, and there's some experiments that we did, and some comparisons that we did to other methods, and we did a user study. And we're kind of out of time, so I'm going to skip that.
The time is very dependent on you, by the way. I feel that if you can spare us more time, we would love to hear.
Yeah, but it depended on me. But since we're an hour and a half into the talk, I don't want everybody to be tired, and then the only thing they're going to remember is how long it was, and that they were really tired and wanted to be left alone. So I'm not going to drag this any longer.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So so this is about it, and I invite anyone who wants to know more. So feel free to email me and ask me whatever. And I just want to mention. Oh, and I really wanted to send you a link to this workshop about deep internal learning, and from there you can get to all the other stuff that I've been doing lately, on completely different topics. And so let me just find it, and then I'll send this in the chat to everyone.
All the references I will post on Reddit. Everybody will have it. Also, those who weren't on the lecture today but watch the recording will have access.
Here it is. Great. So here it is. Wow, chat. So 56 messages in the chat.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk.
So here it is. We mentioned it for some reason, but I'm now re-mentioning it as a chance to share with all of you all the other things that I've been doing over at the Weizmann Institute. This is a very novel topic, different from any of the things that we've just discussed. And it was really great, and I want to thank everyone. It was really, I really enjoyed this talk, and you had some really great questions. So I was very happy to do it, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Assaf. Thank you so much for coming in. You and I, we spoke about maybe doing more lectures on your other fields of research. If you would be interested, I would for sure like to host you more. This is about the deep internal learning, if I remember right. I think me and probably everybody here would love to hear more from what you have to teach to us. This was really, really cool. And the last slide exactly like shows the interesting, really interesting visually parts of what you did. Very impressive work. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Peter, for inviting me.
Yeah, sure, for sure. I'm sending here again. There will be all the reference we spoke. We will post them on the Reddit. I'm sending all the links to everywhere you can find the community. There was a very, very, Assaf, during your talk, huge live discussion here. People were talking about image generation, like stuff that were a bit off topic, so I didn't mention them. I could send you the text of all the chat here so you could see it. I might even share the entire text also. You need to think about it. I posted just now a link to the Discord. If anybody's interested, you can continue all the discussions there. I'm also updating there constantly new things that I see, and everybody's actually updating there. So that the recording will be on YouTube, the channel I just posted. And I will post on the newsletter once the recording is up, and I will also post the next lecture there and everything. So feel free to register. Yeah, the community is almost, I think on Meetup we passed 1,000 people. Crazy. This is within 3 months. I wasn't expecting when it first started to have this thing. And we are gonna have really a lecture each week from now on. I've built up, we have a lot of lectures coming in. I just didn't post them yet. People from Australia and United States and Germany, researching a lot with computer vision, a lot with 3D reconstruction and modeling also, and a lot with image generation. Yeah, I am always looking for new lecturers, for new speakers, people who are working on something that is not trivial, on high-end things, which we sometimes have less access to the knowledge and information there. Just like Assaf was able to share with us his knowledge, this is unique opportunities for us to come and learn about the real developments. It's not stuff that you can easily find on Google. You need to search a long time. And I'm always looking for more speakers who can teach us about these things. So please, if you know anybody, feel free to contact them to me and we will have them on. Yeah, this is it. Somebody asked me about the references. I will, Valentin, I will post a post and you could also respond to it if you would like, with all the references you posted here. I think this is it, if I'm not forgetting. Go ahead.
I just ask another question, right? So with regards to generating all these, would it be possible to actually include in like a light source?
Yes, about light source?
Yes, like let's say if you have like a mask and you are able to kind of understand the light source, the direction of the light source of the mask itself, and then generate images based in that light source point of view, because that will make the images look more contextually relevant. I feel. I'm not sure if that's true.
Well, so my formal answer is I don't know. So this goes to the direction of neural rendering, which is a super cool research direction, and maybe it is possible, like having some kind of rendering layer. Yeah, but you know, yeah. You can try. I mean,
it's called relighting. It does. There are papers who would do that. I'll send a state of the art report from EGSR and EG and CVPR this year, and part of it discusses relighting.
Thank you, Valentin, as well. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no questions, I think we can wrap up and say thank you all and goodbye.
thank you.
See you on the next event.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be the
Thanks.
last one to log off. Thank you all. Bye-bye.